Josefina, do you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
And now it's okay. 2, 1. Hi.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
We hear loud and clear. C'est bon. Tu as ton micro branché? Qu'est-ce que ça fait? Non? Micro branché. Non, non, non. Le bébé. Joséphine. Josefina? Can you hear me?
Okay.
Josefina? Yes, it's okay now. So, hello everybody. Thank you to be here with us from. So we are in Paris with some colleagues, and we have also other countries, Chile, Venezuela, and Brazil. Yesterday we have some problem of connection with Colombia, and also I ask if Josefina can make the presentation just after Pia, okay? So all the conference will be recorded, and we can use this record after to communicate about this video conference. Here is the agenda. So I will make a local introduction of the conference, and after, Pia Witch from Chile will expose a presentation about public sustainability policy and life cycle analysis practices. After, so we will have Josefina from Venezuela, who presents CSR in Venezuela. And we make a short break and of 15 minutes. And after, we heard Ana Claudia from Brazil and Kavita. We could also, after, for conclusion of the video conference, talked about the international platform for responsible business model and CSR, and talked about international network, expectations of each of us, and development of this network. So now I want to precise you some organizational message So everybody has closed the microphone, so it's okay for us. Please, if you have some question, you can use at the right the public forum. This public forum will be recorded, is recorded too. So it is very useful to keep in mind the question. If you want to send message, personal message to participants, you can use the forum, but you click on option 5. For technical problem, you can send message to me or to Paris because one of our students can help you to solve this technical problem. Okay? So, do you have some question of it's okay? Everybody's okay? Okay. Yes. Okay. That's fine. So I will put the presentation of Pia. And Pia, now I let you introduce you and present your speech.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got my...
Great. So, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon in France. I will be talking to you today about public policy and how it relates to sustainability and life cycle practices. My name is Pia Viche, and I'm an expert in sustainability. I work both in Chile and in other countries. And I also teach sustainability at one of the biggest universities in Chile, which is the Catholic University in Valparaiso.
You are now muted.
Our agenda for this presentation, we will go briefly through the topics, starting with some main principles. Of course, sustainable development, the precautionary principle, which is important for public policy, and life cycle thinking. And then we will move on to some examples of life cycle thinking in public policies related to sustainability, such as green public procurement, green taxes, and the recycling law. And we will end with the conclusions. It's really important when speaking about sustainability to be very clear on what sustainable development means. Sustainability was an invented word, but the actual phrase is sustainable development. And this is a special type of development. It's not just economic. It's a development that considers economic, social, and environmental variables, and one that meets the needs of our generation, but with a special plus, and that is that we shouldn't, by meeting our needs, be sacrificing the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And let's take a moment and try to imagine ourselves 20 years ago. 20 years ago, there was probably no way we could have imagined that in our lifetime, we would be needing machines like smartphones that didn't exist 20 years ago, or that our children would need computers to work and do homeworks, or that people in general would need to be connected. So the question is, what will the needs of the people here, of ourselves, in 20 years be? And how can we protect the ability of society to meet the needs in 20 years from now? And until now, the answer has been let's take care of our natural resources, and let's look after peace in the world so that we have a social structure and an economic structure that will allow us to live and thrive. Many countries in the world are taking this step into this sustainable development, especially with the recent signing and adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals. And a principle that is quite useful for meeting sustainable development is the precautionary principle. The precautionary principle works like this. So when you go to a trial, the judge will consider you innocent until there's enough proof against you, and so that people can actually prove that you're guilty. The precautionary principle is the exact opposite. We think that whatever is being judged will harm the environment unless we are absolutely sure that it will not. So with the precautionary principle, we start thinking that things are harmful. Why is this important? Because many times when a new medicine or a new substance comes into the market, we don't really know the long-term effects of this particular substance, and we don't really have time to test it. Using the precautionary principle, we just don't use it until we are sure. So we keep on with the current technology. And this principle is applied in Chile in a number of ways. I will just give a couple of examples in this slide. One is the fact that we have an environmental assessment system through which every project, so every investment that is done in the country that has a reasonable size, has to go through this environmental assessment system. And it has to be assessed by all of the ministries and all of the agencies that are related to the project. Once all of these agencies have approved the project, only then it gets to be built and operated. And this stops harmful projects to be from being built. One example is a thermal power plant that was recently banned, that was recently not approved for construction because it was going to be harmful for the people living near the plant. And how does this relate to social well-being? That is the topic of this conference, social responsibility. Well, the fact that we have environmental or emission norms protects the health of people and protects the health of the environment, which in turn protects the health of people again. So looking after our environment is another way of looking after society. There is a huge number of initiatives in our country, in Chile, related to sustainability. There's almost 160 initiatives in different ministries of the government and agencies. And until recently, they were all separated. So if the Ministry of Energy wanted to do something, they would just have a new policy, long-term policy, or a new initiative inside the ministry. Recently, the Ministry of the Environment has come up with a national policy for sustainable consumption and production that is trying to bring all of these initiatives together, articulate them, so that they're only one big piece of public policy that moves forward in the same direction. This is an example of life cycle thinking. And why is life cycle thinking important? Well, it is important because it has many advantages. Many of the governments in Latin America work in the same way that the Chilean government works. That is, the Ministry of the Environment does not talk to Ministry of Energy, and that one does not talk to the Ministry of Public Affairs or whatever. And life cycle thinking forces you to foster collaboration, to collaborate with other ministries and agencies. What is life cycle thinking? It's a way of looking at things that considers multiple impacts or multiple consequences over a long stretch of time and a long stretch of activities. The life cycle thinking is a concept that comes from the life cycle. That's the figure that you're seeing in the image, where the life cycle of anything starts with the extraction of raw materials, continues through a manufacturing stage, then on to the use of the product that is being produced, or it can also be a service, and it finalizes with the end of life. That is when you throw away the item or you recycle it and it comes back into the system. Thinking in terms of the life cycle allows you to find sources of efficiency for your system and to really focus your efforts on what's going to be most important. It reduces net impact and avoids transforming one problem into another. Many times, think about social policies. So let's say we are trying to foster people getting out of poverty. And for doing that, we make people go to public schools. So we force them, we have one specific initiative that will put everyone into school. But because we don't have other initiatives that are forming more professors, for instance, or increasing the quality of public schools, we just keep these people in poverty. If we think of the system as a whole, we have a bigger chance of fixing the most important things that will actually help us get to our goals. And that is why life cycle thinking is important. How do we see all of these principles that I have been talking about in public policy? And I would like to thank already for the questions that are coming through the chat. I will be answering those after the presentation. The first public policy I would like to talk about is public procurement. In Chile, we have an open public procurement platform, so anyone can sell to the state. This public procurement depends on the direction of procurement and public contracts. And the goal of this direction is to create value and to have a more efficient and transparent procurement for the state. So we're talking about efficiency here, and we're talking about creating value. And we're going to do all of that with a big focus on social responsibility. The main motivation for the government to come up with this open procurement site platform was to allow little producers, so small companies, micro companies that we call, to survive by selling to the state. That is more or less 4% of the economy in Chile. To choose the vendor for the state, we have a number of green criteria. There are 5 examples here. We have energy efficiency of the products, and you can check energy efficiency with labels such as the Energy Star. We have environmental impact of the product. Sometimes there are products with great environmental impacts. And some that are related specifically to social issues are working conditions in terms of safety and availability of contracts, that workers are being paid fair salaries that are above the minimum, and that the company is recruiting people with disabilities. So we are bringing these people into the economy, into society, and we're giving them independence. So all of these criteria give you extra points when you're competing with other vendors. The vendor that gets more points gets the contract. The second law that I would like to talk about is green taxes. This is a couple of articles in our taxes law, and they were included in a recent modification to the law because Chile has a big commitment to reducing climate change and protecting the health of its people. And after an assessment, it was seen that the emissions from mobile vehicles and from large stationary sources, so think about a power plant here, that's a large stationary source. These two were causing lots of problems to the health of people. And we have two tools to prevent this contamination, this pollution. One is a tax that you pay once. When you buy a new car, you pay a special tax depending on the efficiency of the motor of the car, and specifically depending on the emissions of nitrogen oxides of the car. This tax can be quite large. It can be $1,000 or it can be $25,000. It's a big tax. So that has already had a few results, and the main one is that the companies that sell cars in Chile are importing cars that are more efficient because they're not getting to sell the cars which are not efficient. Also, it has had several $1 million are being recollected every year because of this tax for new cars. The second tax is the one on large stationary sources, and this tax is paid year after year. So it's every year for a power plant. Imagine for a power plant, you're paying a huge tax on 4 different substances every single year of operation. And the substances are particulate material that is very bad for your lungs, nitrogen oxide that generates ozone and other substances in the atmosphere, sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide. And the last one is what is called a green tax because it has to do with climate change. We have one of the heaviest taxes on carbon dioxide in the world. In the bottom, you can see what is expected for 2017. We expect to recollect over $200 million in taxes only because of these two specific taxes on emissions. Finally, I would like to tell you about the recycling law. This is a really exciting law. I'm sorry that the image is a little bit expanded, but what you can see in the image is a life cycle like the one we saw in the beginning of this presentation. And why is the life cycle here? Because the recycling law is a law that is based on life cycle thinking. We have a framework for waste management, and we have a tool in this framework that is the extended responsibility of the producer. And this law was made to reduce the huge cost of collection and final disposal of waste that could be up to 40% of the budget of a municipality. So this is a lot of money from the state that is going on to waste collection and disposal. And this is why the law was first written. Of course, the second motivation of the law is to protect the health of people and protect the health of the environment. And the aim of the law is to work towards a circular economy. What is a circular economy? It is an economy where waste becomes a resource again. So we don't throw things away. The recycling law has a number of values. Some of the most important are that the polluter pays for the collection of the waste, and that there's a hierarchy in waste management. So what the law is trying to do is to promote the prevention of the production of waste. And it does it through an interesting tool that is called eco-design that we're going to see on the next slide. If you cannot prevent waste from happening, you can always reuse it. If you cannot reuse your waste, you can recycle it. If you cannot recycle it, you can at least use it to produce energy, as in many countries in Europe where there's incineration of waste. And finally, if you could not do any of these things, you have to eliminate it. You can see here that the precautionary principle is one of the principles of the recycling law, and that we have the responsibility of the generator of the waste to get rid of it. The extended responsibility of the producer works like this. If I produce bottles, so let's imagine that I produce bottled water, I have to pay someone to collect the bottles, the empty bottles of water, after my customers have bought them. These people not only have to collect the bottles of water, they also have to add value to them. So they have to recycle them or reuse them in some way. And I should organize and finance this system. People in the system, people, the consumers, are requested to bring the materials into the containers or the recollection spots. And the Ministry of the Environment, depicted here, defines recollection goals and valorization goals. We have 6 categories of products that we have started this law with, but more products are going to come as time goes by. The first one is oils and lubricants, here on the side of the screen. Second one is electronic and electric devices. The third and sixth categories are batteries, but it's 2 different types of batteries. One is a big batteries from machinery or cars or trucks, and the other one is the little batteries that we use in our home appliances, for instance. Fourth one is packaging, and finally we have car tires. I was telling you before about eco-design, and eco-design is design that happens with life cycle thinking. When you look at a product and you design it so that it can be recycled, so that you have less packaging, so that you can transport it more safely. So you're thinking not only on the design at the factory, but also on the use and the end of life of your product. This is eco-design. And it is included in the recycling law because when you use eco-design, you will normally reduce the amount of waste. So you will get to the goal, to the main goal, the highest hierarchy, that it is prevention of waste in Chile. So it's been a lot of information in a little amount of time, but I hope that you go home with these ideas. First, that life cycle thinking is pivotal for reaching social well-being, because when we think in terms of the life cycle, we are thinking about the safety of people, but also the safety of products and production processes to the environment. Also that there is regional experience, there is experience in Latin America about using a life cycle thinking and life cycle tools like eco-design in public policy. The third main idea is that life cycle public policy can be used to foster more sustainable behavior by citizens. So think about the example of people being motivated to buy more efficient cars because of the tax. This is a more sustainable choice. And finally, that sustainable policies are being successfully used to green the economy and close loops, generating a circular economy in the country. And you can think about this on the recycling law. Hopefully, in the future, we will move forward into this life cycle perspective so that we can coordinate all the current initiatives in the government, these 160 initiatives that we have in the beginning of the presentation, and we can make it a coherent strategy towards sustainable production and consumption. And with that, I would like to leave you. It's been a pleasure to being the first speaker at this conference. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I believe now yes?
So now we are going to
You are now unmuted.
answer the question. First question from Kavita. Was about the circular economy.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see the question. Does this concept of sustainability needs to be rethinked?
Yeah.
And should we think of something more related to the circular economy? Kavita, that's a great question. And we don't need to rethink sustainability. In fact, the circular economy is a concept that stems from sustainable development. It's something that came out in the way of thinking how to be more sustainable. So they're both very related. Normally, if you have a circular economy, you will have a more sustainable society. So no need to really rethink the concept, but to action it. We have a lot of concepts in this area, but we don't have enough action on it. The circular economy is a great example of a framework that allows you to become more sustainable, and that's more of what we need. Beatrice, the second question in the forum is yours, but I don't quite understand it. Is there law on non-financial reporting? So are you talking about sustainability reporting and like the GRI?
In France, we have a specific law, and in Europe, we have a directive for big firms about the extra financial report. And in this report, they have to publish information about the social and environmental programs. And so it is very important because inside this law, investors are concerned too. And so, for example, it can be very interesting for some now to develop a specific program about CSR. I just wanted to know if in Chile you talked about reporting because there are big groups that are going to report not only in their country but in all countries where they are.
Yes, we don't have a law on non-financial reporting, but we have. So at the beginning of the presentation, I told you about a system, an environmental assessment system. When projects go through this system, many times the different agencies or the ministries will require them to have mitigation strategies or mitigation activities for the impacts that they will have on society or on the environment. When a company includes such actions in their documents that goes through the system, they have to report on the status of them every few months or every year. So although there's not a law, this reporting is compulsory. So they can get a fine if they don't send the report. That's the kind of reporting that we have. Many of our bigger companies, like Codelco, the company that produces 30% of the copper of the world, 10% in fact, of the copper of the world, they have complex social responsibility structures, and they report on this on their annual report. But all of that is voluntary. None of it is compulsory. It is only compulsory if you promise to do it when you went through this. There's another question. Life cycle thinking implies changing business models. You talk about functional economy to sell use instead of product. It's an alternative. Of course, there's many things that we can talk about in this area. I wish that we have another conference in the future talking on sustainability policies. Yes, it's an alternative to sell use instead of the product for more sustainable business models, such as, for example, in France, you can rent cars. They're kind of parked in the street. I'm sure that Beatrice has seen them. They're parked in the street. They're electric cars, and you come with your credit card, take the car out, use it for a while, then come back, get charged in your credit card, and plug it in to the socket again. And that is a use of a car. You don't need to buy a car. You can just rent it to go to the supermarket or whatever and bring it back. So definitely, that is a very good alternative to more sustainable business models, and to more than more sustainable, it's a great alternative for dematerializing the economy. So when we speak about dematerialization, we are thinking about using less materials to lend the same service. And this is a great alternative to do that. From Universidad de Lima, there's a question on monitoring and measuring. Is that in charge of a special unit like the Green Police? Indeed. Sorry, I couldn't hear you correctly.
You are now muted.
Oh, yeah. I think that someone left its microphone open.
Hello? Yes, it is okay.
Hello?
People from Lima can ask the question they can ask directly, but yes, if you can answer.
Yes. So we have a green police in Chile. And it's called the Superintendents of the Environment. And this is a very scary green police. I call them, this is like Agent Smith in Matrix. They're really good at what they do, and they have a pretty good control of activities in Chile. So, and some of the largest fines in the history of the country are related to environmental misconduct. We have a perhaps in the future I can give you another presentation for those who are interested on the what we call the institutionality of the environment in Chile. It's pretty complex. We have a green police, we have the superintendents, we have special judges which are only related to the environment, so courtrooms that are only related to the environment, and we have the ministry, and we have a group of ministries that are related to the environment, and they take the higher political decisions. Yes, it is indeed necessary to create an enforcement unit to make laws work in reality. The superintendents came to life in 2013, and they are only getting bigger. They're really doing a very good job at controlling emissions in the country. And this is probably one of the reasons why the environment is better taken care of here in Chile for the last 10 years, because of this special green police. And I would totally advise all of the other countries in the region to have an environmental police that has enough power to fine and to sue companies who are not respecting the law. I have finished.
Yeah.
Thank you for the congratulations. I have finished with the questions which were written. Is there anyone else that has a question that has not written in the chat?
Yes, thank you very much, Pia. Perhaps we could ask Marieta from Colombia, but after the break. So I propose Josefina to present. Is it possible, Josefina?
Yes, yes.
So I just put your presentation.
I don't see it.
You don't hear me?
No, I don't see the presentation.
Yes, wait a minute. It's okay now.
Okay. Yes, now I see it.
You can change the slide.
I can control it.
Thank you very
Let me
much,
see.
Pia. And let's go, Josefina. You can present yourself and discuss.
Hello, I'm Josefina Brunicelli. I am from Instituto de Estudios Superiores de Administración in Caracas, Venezuela. How do I turn the slide? I'm not sure how to change the slide. It doesn't, oh, here it is. I found it. Okay. Thank you. So I will be talking about corporate social responsibility in Venezuela and some of its challenges at this moment. I will talk, first of all, about the context in which Venezuelan companies have developed their corporate social responsibilities. And I will compare it with the general movement in the world and consider why the Venezuelan agenda of corporate social responsibility.
Yes, excuse me, Josefina. Could you put a little bit away from the microphone? Because
Okay, let me see. Because I have earphones. Wait a second.
yes, okay.
Let me lower the volume. Maybe that's a solution. Can you hear me better now?
It's better now.
Is it better?
In Lima, it's better. It's the same.
Maybe if I speak slower, is that good?
Sounds better. Yeah, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I will put it away a little bit. So I will speak of corporate social responsibility in Venezuela. I will argue that the corporate social responsibility agenda of Venezuelan companies today is a little different from the general world tendency. I will discuss a little bit about that. And I will be also talking about what I consider should be an expanded agenda for corporate social responsibility of companies in Venezuela. So I will give a little bit of history about Venezuelan CSR. From the time Bowen created the concept of social responsibility in 1953 up to about 1990, Venezuelan companies followed the North American model of corporate social responsibility. And the reason why Venezuela did that is because we are an oil country. And as an oil country, we are highly influenced by oil companies and other multinational. Can you hear me? And other multinational companies that came to the country during the oil boom eras. Basically, the model was a corporate philanthropy model. From the early 20th century, Venezuelan companies started creating, very much in the North American model, foundations, corporate foundations for corporate giving. And after World War II, or during World War II rather, Venezuela created a law that through a reform of our civil code that created formally the figure of a foundation, of a corporate foundation. So corporate foundation was created formally as a legal figure in 1942. And from then on, many large companies in Venezuela have created foundations and have worked through basically a corporate philanthropy model. With two central issues in mind. The first and most important of the Venezuelan agenda through to the 90s was basically voluntary or extra attention to their own workers. There was a large tradition in that regard. And the second was simply donations to the needy in the classical sense. Starting in 1990, there has been a divergence between the global CSR movement or tendencies and the Venezuelan agenda. As you all know, the global tendency in CSR, starting with globalization in the 1990s, has been in a different direction than before that. It's become more international. It's become more about self-regulation. It's become more about international institutions that regulate rather than only governmental laws within countries, given the transnational nature of environmental impacts. So these tendencies that we may talk about as sustainable development, which Pia talked about in the last presentation, the new concerns with human rights and contributions to development, issues of corporate governance and integrity, those big issues today are not the issues that Venezuelan companies, at least since the 90s up to today, are concerned with at all. Now, why has this divergence occurred, or rather, what is, first of all, the CSR agenda of Venezuelan companies since the 90s? Well, basically, and this is interesting, it's been exactly the same agenda as before. Basically, attention to social investment or communities, the well-being of workers, and basically just a philanthropic approach, but with a difference. What I'm saying is the CSR agenda in Venezuela looks the same. Basically, companies pay attention to their communities and to the workers, but basically what probably has changed is more the motive, what the motivations are, and it's gone more from being a purely philanthropic activity of, let's say, families who own the companies towards society, and it's turned more into sort of a strategic sort of activity that has to do with managing an increasingly adverse business environment. So in that sense, even though what they do is the same in the sense that they act with investments in their communities or inside their companies with their workers, the motivation is clearly different. And in that sense, I would say that there has been a change, but certainly not in the direction of what we would call the global tendencies in CSR. So given this and looking at what Venezuelan companies do today, as I said, today they basically work in three areas, which is community philanthropy, and in terms of mostly worker training and also training in the communities where they are located. Other than that, what we would call corporate responsible behavior, which is not the same as a classical category of corporate social responsibility that has a volunteer or voluntary connotation to it. Other than that, all other behavior that is responsible basically is related to the law. And I would say, and I know this is an issue of, whether corporate social responsibility has to come out voluntarily from a company or if it has come from the law. But at least in Venezuela, there are many legal obligations of companies that have to do with the condition of workers and environmental issues, etc., that at least within our environment are not considered corporate social responsibility. They are considered simply complying with the law. Now, but nothing is being done by companies, at least in Venezuela, in those two categories, like human rights or environmental footprint area. Nothing is being done beyond the law at all. Now, why have companies in Venezuela stayed or lagged behind in many ways with the international tendencies? I would say that much of it has to do with the particular social and political situation in Venezuela. For example, the increasing emphasis of Venezuelan companies in corporate philanthropy is an interesting issue because in community philanthropy, because the problem, at least in our country in the last 20 years, has been that communities surrounding companies has become increasingly difficult to manage. There is increasing demographic pressure, there's increasing violence, there's increasing sort of disposition to protest and demand things from companies, and also an increasing expectation that companies will attend to all necessities of communities surrounding companies. So that has created a situation whereby Venezuelan companies must do a lot of community management and of trying to establish pacts of non-aggression with communities surrounding them. And that implies transferring resources towards those communities. And also, it has implied also trying to stimulate or promote or train communities to develop their own productive activities. Because in order to basically reduce pressure of communities to obtain more benefits from the companies. In a way, companies have an interest in developing their own communities, surrounding communities, in order to lower the pressure of communities on the companies. So that example of the community, the way Venezuelan companies are paying attention to communities and the way they're relating to communities gives you sort of a feel of the more strategic attention to community, to corporate giving. I would say less for basically just purely altruistic reasons and more for strategic motives of managing an adverse environment. I have explained, as you see, why Venezuelan companies have basically limited their corporate social responsibility agenda in terms of voluntary action, as I'm saying, to very traditional social activities, but with a more strategic emphasis. And and I will be arguing in the next part of this presentation that even though to a certain extent we would say that this is a way of adjusting to their environment on the part of companies, it is actually an insufficient agenda because it does not solve a very serious problem that is being faced by Venezuelan corporations and companies of every size today, which is what I call the low social efficacy of Venezuelan companies. By social efficacy, and that is a concept I would like to define at this moment, I mean basically the capacity of companies to, let's put it this way, to generate more positive value than negative value for society. So long as companies do that, basically societies will consider the figure of a company to be a valid figure in society, because companies are a social fabrication. They are not a natural person. They're an institution that has been invented by humankind. And today, as you all know, Venezuela is a country going through a lot of turmoil, but part of the turmoil has to do with a lot of questioning on the part of certain coalitions in government of the value of corporations, of private corporations, as an entity that maybe should not exist. So the question of social efficacy is important to address in that sense. Now, it is important to take into account that in Venezuela, as in many third world countries or low-income countries or non-developed countries, however you would want to call them, have issues with social efficacy that affect the long-term sustainability of the figure of the corporation or of the private corporation. And among these, at least in Venezuela, is that the private corporations create few jobs. Many of the investments are short-term, not long-term. There is an environment in Venezuela conducive to crony capitalism, which is sort of a corrupt type of capitalism that does not leave anything for the country, but rather extracts resources from the country. Venezuela has few competitive clusters, and we had some competitive clusters, but competitive clusters have been disappearing. There is a general low productivity, and like I said, there is an anti-capitalist political discourse. This situation lowers the capacity to be long-term sustainable and the viability of corporations in Venezuela. And in my view, the kind of social responsibility agenda that is being managed today by Venezuelan companies, basically centered in attending their workers and in community management, is certainly not sufficient. Venezuelan companies in the last years have been attending to the problem of challenge to their existence, basically through public relations campaigns, trying to create a positive public opinion of companies, In fact, there have been various campaigns, and actually, if we look at the results of public opinion, it's actually not so bad. 77% of the population in Venezuela considers that private corporations are necessary for development, and that is in that sense, there is a good opinion of companies that still have, despite the institutional environment that does not help, they still have a pretty good, people still have a pretty good opinion of them. But I would say that this is not enough, because it is very hard to operate in a non-corrupt way in Venezuela. The legal environment of hyper-regulation has created a situation where only large companies have survived, and small and middle-sized companies have had a tendency to disappear in the country. There's very little public sector support for R&D, so there's no R&D at all. High levels of crime have affected very much all of Venezuelan economic operations. The infrastructure is insufficient. There's not enough electricity, for example, to operate factories. Price distortions have created a very difficult situation for companies, and macroeconomic instability also. So in this context, it is not enough for companies to be preemptive with communities and to invest in their people in order to obtain their loyalty. I would say that possibly the private sector corporations and their leaders will have to move more into the category of what we call political corporate social responsibility, which is a concept developed by Scherer and Palazzo that basically suggests that CSR should move towards what we call political responsibility, the difference being that CSR is doing what society sort of expects from companies beyond the law, sort of going from the legal to the normative. But political responsibility is rather more an act of agency. It's when corporations or their leaders try to act proactively rather than reactively in the direction of improving their society. And in the case of Venezuela in particular, and I think this applies to many other less developed countries, I would say that economic or rather business leaders and their companies must assume a political responsibility of creating change within their societies, and more specifically, change in the direction of improving the institutional environment that will lead to sort of a virtuous sort of capitalism rather than the more crony type of capitalism that many times develops in social spaces such as our own. So, as I said, in Venezuela, the key issue is that Venezuela lacks an appropriate institutional structure for healthy and productive capitalism right now. And my position is that corporations and their leaders must assume the responsibility of pushing for the creation of such a institutional infrastructure. And in that sense, they must assume a more political stance rather than a more passive stance in that direction. That leads me to the development of three categories that I would like to contrast. The first would be, and let me talk about them first and then I'll develop it a little bit, what we call corrupt behavior versus responsible behavior, versus just entrepreneurial or corporate responsible behavior versus politically responsible behavior on the part of corporations. And I'd like to contrast the three in the following sense. For example, corrupt behavior among companies would be what we call grand corruption, which is that, for example, companies would pay public sector officials in order to get a contract or in order to change the rules of the game in their favor. All those things that we criticize about lobbying and in countries like the United States, or about just straight corruption in countries like Venezuela. That would be the corrupt behavior. Entrepreneurial responsible behavior, for example, would be to promote laws that are in favor of your economic sector. For example, if you're in the pharmaceutical sector, something that goes in favor of your sector, but that is not immoral in the corrupt sense of the word. Something that is in your favor, but that does not necessarily have a negative connotation in the corruption sense, that you're going to do harm to another. So that would be just the way normally a group would act in their own interest. Now, political responsible behavior, it is different. It would be to promote norms and laws that attend to the collective interest and that have a long-term vision. And in that sense, as seeing corporate social responsibility, which I have defined as I would say, voluntary behavior, not reaction to a law or legislation. Political responsible behavior on the part of companies would be, or their leaders would be, to promote norms and laws that do not only have the interest of the group as entrepreneurial responsible behavior, but rather to promote laws that are have a long-term and collective interest focus to them. So that would be like the basic difference between the three. There are many other dimensions by which we could consider the difference between the three. Let me give you another example. Corrupt behavior would be to, for example, for a company to give false information to a regulator or to be non-transparent. Entrepreneurial responsible behavior would be to give the right information, correct one, but not to demand more transparency. Just be very passive about governmental transparency. And political responsible behavior instead would be to be an active agent in a process of trying to get government to be more transparent. So those would be the three ideas, that the difference between the three concepts in that dimension. I'll give you a final example. For example, let me see. Corrupt behavior would be to capture public spaces to regulate in your favor. that would be when you capture your own regulator, like you put your own people in a regulating agency in order to be not for that agent not to regulate you correctly. And that happens a lot in government. Entrepreneurial responsible behavior would be, for example, to be passive about the fact that many regulations are bad quality regulations, that they're ambiguous, that they allow for corruption. And politically responsible behavior would be to try to promote norms of greater quality that can actually be complied with, that are transparent in their design. So that kind of activism would be what I call then politically responsible behavior. So my conclusion is that Venezuelan companies, the agenda of Venezuelan companies in CSR has not changed much in the last 60 years. In contrast to companies in the developed world, we have experienced very little change since 1990, when globalization began to change the course of CSR and incorporated into it the sustainability approach. Basically, the reason why Venezuelan companies have maintained the old agenda has been the social political circumstances. Even though the old agenda has been maintained, the motives for maintaining it are different. Before it was more philanthropic, now it's more strategic, has more to do with managing an adverse environment. And finally, my proposition is that even though this CSR approach of Venezuelan companies seems well aligned with our present situation, Venezuelan companies should expand the scope of their CSR to a more political sort of CSR, where they become more active agents in trying to create an institutional environment that will allow private companies or assure among private companies greater social efficacy and institutional legitimacy in their social spaces. So if you have any questions, I am all ears.
Thank you very much, Josefina. There are some questions on the forum. I don't know if you want to read them and answer.
Which is the first one?
The first one concerned. I just put. Is there some local companies that produce CSR report or not?
No, not at all. There was one that produced a GRI report, maybe up to 6-7 years ago. And there were some banks that used to produce them. There was a movement to produce reports by the VENAMCHAM, which is the Venezuelan American Chamber of companies, and they created a methodology to do that, a voluntary methodology. And there has been some of that, but there's actually less emphasis on that right now. It was something that was done more up until about 8 years ago.
Yes. Okay. Yes, we think is that this law about reporting can really help development of social and environmental programs in countries like Venezuela from international firms, for example. And the second question is from Lima. The question, does the concept of CSR include value of citizenship? And would the promotion for citizenship clash with political conditions and corruption in Venezuela?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the question means exactly. Let's see. Yes, I would maybe assimilate it to the idea of human rights, citizenship concept, both in first generation and second generation. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, it's better now. Yes. Yes, now we hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. I could assimilate the concept of citizenship to first and second generation human rights. First generation human rights is civil rights. The second generation rights is social rights of citizens. Yes, of course it should, and the tendencies, the new tendencies in CSR since 1990, since the sustainability concept entered the CSR, and it became a more global issue, has incorporated the social part of it. Remember that in the original concepts of sustainable development, it was basically an ecological concept, an ecological idea, and it expanded also to human rights concept, and it has the citizenship dimension to it, of course. So yes, it should. Now, does the promotion of citizenship clash with political conditions and corruption in Venezuela? Yes, in terms of civil rights, yes, definitely so. There's a clash there. Now, yes. Next question.
It's a question of Pia. How can CSR influence social peace in Venezuela?
Is it safe for companies to do such thing? Yes. We have had some interesting experiences with certain companies in Venezuela that have worked with their communities in the direction of creating a social peace. But like I say, the capacity of working in that sense has been very much in their own environment. To give you an example, there's a rum company in Venezuela called Ron Santa Teresa, who is basically almost the only company left around the area where it operates. And there's a large population, they're very poor in the area, and there was a lot of crime. And the company created it was not done by like the CSR department. It was done by the president of the company. He took a leading role in the community to work directly with how do you call them? With these young men who committed crime. So he actually brought into the company a few of them in a sort of pact where they had to work and study in the company. And it turned out that many of these young crime mongers and complete bands of crime started knocking on his door in order to see if they could work with him in his program. So basically, he incorporated them into a sort of a learning and training program. And incredibly, these young men actually wanted to join it. And some of them work for the company now. Others have created their own companies. And part of the work that now this entrepreneur is doing is he's trying to become a very active agent in economic development of the area beyond his own company. And he's trying to create the infrastructure to do that. And he's actually negotiated, even with the Chavista government, which is actually sort of anti-him, to create conditions for economic development independent of the company in the surroundings. And it's actually been a very interesting experience. The thing is that it seems that kind of leadership is not so abundant. It seems that not every entrepreneurial leader is capable of bringing about that kind of political leadership in the corporate responsible sense, because he doesn't want to be a politician. He just wants to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Josefina.
Okay.
We just now make a break. I try to connect with Marietta and to put his presentation, and so if it is okay, Marietta could present just after the break. We let 15 minutes break now, okay? And,
Okay.
we connect in 15 minutes. Thank you very much. You can continue to ask questions, no problem. And we connect in 15 minutes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
See you in 15 minutes.
See you in 15
Bye.
minutes, yeah.
Boom.